What's going on, everyone? So, From has done everything in their power to not admit that Eloise is dead, right? Victor literally takes Henry to the burial site of both Miranda and Eloise. Henry says, that's her. He has his moment. And then he goes, is that her? Is that Eloise? And Victor goes, I think so. Right? Like, they will not confirm whether or not Eloise is actually dead or alive. They just won't. I believe, I don't know this, obviously I'm not a writer, I'm not a director, I'm just a fan, but I believe it's because I don't think that they know quite what they want to do yet. Usually that's why writers and stuff kind of leave it open-ended, right? Kind of leave it that way to where it's like, I think it's her, she's so small, whatever, right? Like, we've had confirmation, we've seen, we've witnessed, everything. They've made it as clear as possible. Miranda is dead. They have done the complete opposite with Eloise. I believe it's because they want to leave the door open potentially, right? Because if you don't flat out confirm it, well then now if you do something later on with Eloise and have her tie in and come back or whatever, right? Well, now you can kind of justify. Now you can go like, hey, we never confirmed she was dead, right? And then if you don't, well, it's like, hey, Victor said he thought it was her, right? Like, and you can kind of just leave it alone, right? You don't have to really touch on it again. You can kind of just let it be a thing, and kind of let fans speculate and explore the ideas and potentials and possibilities and all that, right? Like, it just gives that like, okay, like, hey, we can go either way with this. But what if Eloise is alive? How do you explain where she's been, why she's been gone, what has happened, right? Like, if she's alive, just like living out there in like the woods or whatever, like that, it's a long time. I mean, Victor did it, so you could argue, but it's like, where's she been? Like, she never like explored anywhere. She never heard anyone from the towns, right? Like, how far did she end up running and getting away? Okay, maybe she got into the real world. Okay, if she got in the real world, well then, like, how did she get back? Why is she back? Right? There's just a lot of things that you could that could make things complicated, right? You got to start explaining a bunch of stuff. However, what if she's a story walker, right? So here's the thing. We saw that Tabitha is the reincarnated version of Miranda. Okay, well, one, Julie could, if Eloise is dead, maybe she's the reincarnated version of Eloise. That's always a real possibility. However, what if she, Eloise being, just like Julie, has the capability of story walking, right? I've talked about how, like, is Julie the first ever story walker? Is she the first one that's discovered this ability? And I think it's a real possibility. I think it's actually more likely, right? Because all the other versions have failed, as we've seen. But we've seen with this version, like Jade and Tabitha, for example, they're the first ones to succeed. They're the first ones to actually unlock the memories and the Ankui and all that stuff, right? Like, we're in the group of FROMVILLE occupants that are figuring it out, that are solving and doing things that no other group has been able to do up until this point. Maybe some things, but not all these things, not to this point. So it does make sense that Julie would be the only one that has figured it out to this point. Also, you got to think the talismans didn't exist. So, like, people probably weren't as willing to explore and stuff because they didn't want to get stuck. They didn't want to get trapped, right? Like, you're out in the woods and you got nowhere to go. Like, yeah, you could hide, right? Like, or maybe people did explore deep and they just kept going, right? Like, there's a lot of things, right? It wasn't as safe as it is now. I mean, it's not really safe, but you get the point, right? It's not at what it used to be, where you're basically a sitting duck hoping that these things didn't find you at that point, and these monsters. And those monsters are just the tip of the spear and all that, right? And you'd also have to find the ruins. You'd have to go into the ruins. You'd have to explore the ruins. Also, where are all the other story walkers? Right? Like, that would be the biggest question, right? Like, so are they just like in different stories? Did they get trapped? They get stuck? One of the things that we saw with Julie, right, is we saw her looking completely different, right? Shorter hair, scratch on her face, looking like she ended up somewhere stuck, right? Like, or she had been story walking for a long time. It clearly wasn't the same Julie that we saw in the diner with Ethan talking and having a conversation, right? They made it apparent to show a different version of her, right? Okay, well, what if she did get stuck and she did get trapped and she was traveling through all these stories, or maybe she even just got caught in a story? Because how do you jump back? Once you jump in, because we haven't actually seen her jump in. Once you jump in, how do you get back is the question. Is there just like a door you go through? Or do you have to kind of play out whatever that story is for you to like you have to get to the end of that story so that way you can get back? A lot of questions about that. Well, what if Eloise ended up discovering that she had this ability and ended up jumping back? What if she jumped back to the beginning? Right? She could be trapped somewhere. And she could be trapped what if she trapped in the very beginning? Because look, all of us, when we found out that she could do that, all the first thought we had was like, okay, why doesn't she just go back to the beginning and try to change the story, right? Oh, she can't change the story, okay. Right? But maybe she could try. Well, also, Eloise didn't have an Ethan that relayed how it worked to her. So what if she did get this idea and goes, oh, I want to go and be able to save my mom, or go back to before, before we ended up here, before my mom ended up discovering that, or let me go back to the beginning. I mean, even as a child, you still are going to have thoughts, you're still going to have ideas. What if she stumbled into one of those things and she didn't know what it was because she is a child, right? It's very possible she could have just kind of fallen into one of these stories, right? Maybe she fell into a story with her mom and again got stuck. How do you get back? How do you get back if once you get in, right? Because again, Julie looked like she was stuck. Julie looked like she was potentially trapped. Is that something to where it's like, okay, she can't just get back, right? And she was a child, so maybe she was living in this other story for however long, right? Can she even age in that story, right? Like, that's something else, right? Like, there's so many possibilities and potentials. But I also think it'd be easier to kind of just explain away than, like, everything else. Like, like if she was living out in the woods, like, you've just been surviving. Like, think of Victor, right? Like, we have so many questions about the time frame in which Victor was alone and alive, right? Like, we'd have all those same questions for Eloise if she was alone and survived. If she was in the real world, it's like, well, why did you come back? Okay, well, FROMVILLE brought her back. Well, why? Why did FROMVILLE bring her back? Why didn't they bring her back before? Like, why after all this stuff, right? There's so many things where you're just like, okay, but if she was trapped in a story world, right? If she, as a little girl just kind of, ran after her mother, went the wrong way, ended up at the ruins, walked through the ruins unknowingly, ended up in the dungeon, saw all these different timelines, all these different stories. I didn't know what was happening, didn't know what's going on, because she's, again, a child who's confused and doesn't know what to do. And she just, like, picked a direction, ran to that direction, ran into that story, and then ended up getting stuck. And has just been there forever long. Maybe Julie ends up finding her. Maybe that's how. Maybe Julie's like story hopping and trying to gather information and intel and ends up showing up and finding Eloise trapped, right? Because that would be the question. Okay, well, how does Eloise get back, right? Well, if Julie, because you got to think, like, what's the difference with Julie and Eloise? Why would Julie be able to? Because she knew what it was. She knew she could story walk. She knew it was time travel. She knew she got in this time. Like, a child who grew up in a different time, like, she might just thought, like, oh, that's just another place, FROMVILLE, or, this is just where I'm at now, right? This is where I'm stuck and I'm trapped and I don't know how to get out. Where Julie's figuring it out, right? Like, if I throw you in a train and tell you to drive it, you don't know how to drive it. You're just like, okay, like, and if it just starts driving, you're like, okay, I'm just gonna ride, right? Like, but if I explain to you, hey, like, you got to do X, Y, and Z, well, then now you can kind of better control it, right? And you can kind of teach yourself and work it out and figure it out. It's kind of what happened with Julie, right? Like, Ethan explained what the deal was with her, what she's going through, what she just experienced. And so, yes, she doesn't have all the information, but she has a better chance at kind of figuring out and solving. Like I said, how do you get back? She has a better chance of solving and figuring out how to get back if, she is at least privy to what the deal is. So I just think it's a real possibility that maybe Eloise jumped into a time because she may have had the ability just like Julie, but she wouldn't have known what that ability was. She wouldn't have known anything about it. And then, ended up getting stuck and doesn't know how to get back. And then that could be your kind of way to bring her back, because Julie ends up going to the time in which she's stuck, where she's trapped, brings her back. And then now you got Eloise, Henry, and Victor. I think could make for an interesting idea, personally. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. Pass the question on to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you like this idea? Do you hate this idea? Kind of mixed in the middle? Do you think it's a possibility? Do you think absolutely not? No way. However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one.